Sound good?
Hi, I'm John Ryan. With me is Kurt Shaffer, one of the candidates for the open board seat on the USA Team Handball Board of Directors. Kurt, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, John. Thank you for having me on today.
All right. Well, let's get right to it. Tell me about your handball related background.
Certainly. So, I first ran into handball in summer of 2020. An old college friend, Max Littman, who had just moved back to Columbus from some far off distant land. It was either Texas or Milwaukee, I forget, something like that. But so Max came back, and obviously during COVID, people weren't really doing too much with too many other people. But he lived right down the street from me, and we figured, well, we may as well hang out together, be little COVID buddies. And so I was about, I don't know, a year and a half into my career at this point, and I was kind of bored with my free time, and I was like, yeah, I wish that I could do something else. And I was thinking of what small business I could form or what small business I could do. And I was complaining to him. I was like, I don't know what to do with my free time. I got too much. And he says to me, well, how would you like to be involved with my handball team? I said, what is that? And so from there, he kind of showed me everything he had on it. Columbus Armada uh, ended up that the Olympics were on at that time, and so it was either the Olympics or the World Championship. I forget. So I saw my first ever games on his TV. Was hooked immediately. Said, "Well, all right, this will be what I guess I'm into now." Then from there, just kind of helped out with the Armada, helped with youth programs, developing that as much as I could. Um, we were able to at one point get two, as in two separate youth programs in Columbus that JD Orr and myself were kind of hosting for a while there. But then the real world called, and my actual job told me I could get a promotion if I moved out to Denver. I said, yeah, sure, why not? Moved out to Denver, and ever since I've been with the Denver Wolves as my primary team. Um, with the Denver Wolves taking much more of a player role than a ministerial role, I still want to do some of that stuff. I work with yourself with developing the CU, CSU teams as much as I can help there, and currently working with some of the guys on the Denver Wolf teams to find out a way to get other young adults involved at maybe a less level than the you know high level competitive nature of a full time team. Um, but we're still working on that. So yeah, that's kind of how that's kind of my handball story so far.
All right. Well, that's good. Well, tell me a little bit about your non-handball related background and how it might facilitate you being a good board member.
Certainly. So in my real world job, I'm an operations manager. So I actually run a 40 man, about 40 man, 20 some trucking fleet. So commercial drivers. And we run freight all around Colorado and southern Wyoming. So, my day to day life is a lot of personnel management, a lot of personality management, things like that, and also a lot of setting and planning out how to meet key performance indicators, how to grow strategically, a lot of what's called interfacing with customer teams. Sometimes you have to go out to the customer, say hi to them, and actually at one point got to go out and see the course facility from a little bit more than just their regular tour. That was pretty neat. But in that role, it is a lot of, I think, transferable skills. I've always noticed that one of the big deficits that USA Team Handball does have is how to manage, how to set expectations, how to execute on things, and that's been my career for 6 years at this point.
Fair enough. Um, and then sliding into that, why do you want to be a board member?
Well, that's probably the hardest question to answer. The truth is that I'm sure every other candidate is as, if not more, qualified on paper than me. I know a few of them, and I've nothing negative to say about those guys. I've only even been involved in this sport for about 4 years, so I understand if that's a 10-year thing. A lot of people probably have a little bit of an issue with that, but truly, the reason that I want to get on board now is we're at a we're at an inflection point. The organization is where you have LA 28 coming up, and you have a lot of what seems to be spontaneous growth in the sport at a grassroots level. And I believe that team handball in the United States is perhaps one of one in terms of unique sports that fits the billet of a team sport with some sort of international attraction or Olympic attraction, which the United States has basically no higher level infrastructure for. Obviously, we do have the national team. That's no disrespect to anyone on that team, but we don't have a professional league. We don't have a collegiate system that's beyond a few teams. We don't have any, workable state level youth programs in the country, and we're nearly at the point where a few of those things might start to come online. And if we choose the route of going as every other league in the United States has, with the major leagues where there's 15 owners for 15 teams and it's a closed monopolistic system, this sport is going to be the exact same as all of them. And it will never really get beyond sixth. It'll never really beat out soccer. It'll never beat out baseball or basketball or anything like that. And that's just it. That's game over. At that point, there will be nothing special. There will be none of the fun, interesting, zany things that happen in the sport happening. It'll just be another consumer product. And I think that USATH, as well as myself and what I do for this sport, and frankly put, Americans in general deserve better than to just allow it to be compromised by corporate interest. There's obviously a place everywhere for money. You can't run sports without money, and we should be very cognizant about how to make more of it, frankly put. But the beauty of this sport in the United States is every time you go to a tournament, every time you go to a clinic, every time you see someone playing, they have done absolutely everything on their own. Um, and it's there because they love it. It's, we just hosted in Denver the Somala Cup, Small Super Cup, as Moshe would be very angry if I only said Somala Cup. And we did that because we wanted to, right? We did that out of a love of the game. We didn't all make 20 grand out of it. We didn't all get, you know, our portfolios increased or anything. It probably cost money. Moshe handled the finances of it for the most part, but that's besides the point. Those tournaments and the people who've put in the work this far don't deserve the disrespect of simply being written off whenever the big checks start to come. And I think that it's important to have someone on the board of directors that has that mindset in place.
A lot of good words there, but I'm going to ask you again, and because we do got to move on to some additional topics.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want to be on the board of directors?
Because I want to be able to drive the sport in the direction that I think best suits my ideology towards it.
That's fair, and I think everything you were saying prior to that fits into that. um, Moving on to a couple of topics that I identified. What are your thoughts regarding what happened with the board of directors this past summer and how it might inform your role on the board and the decisions the board makes?
I don't think that there was anything particularly below bar or real interest that happened. Ultimately, USA Team Handball operates underneath the Olympic Committee, and unless the Olympic Committee were to come out and say that there was some sort of major foul play that caused the entire series of events to be null and void, I think that's an admission that whatever happened, I wasn't privy to it. And I know that you have interviewed people, but I'm sure that ultimately neither of us will ever be fully privy to anything. I don't really think that there's anything else really left to say. Ultimately, everybody and that organization is responsible for making sure the organization is safe and that the sport grows. And if any member is singled out as being in a position where they're working to detriment of that or where they're not putting in the effort to do that, well, in a business sense, if you don't do your job, you get fired. In a yeah, in a sense of if the entire board of the US Soccer Federation, right, decides that its leadership isn't doing the job right, they don't just sit on it, right? They do something. So if that's the decision that was made, so be it. But nothing was done against the rules and regulations that wasn't properly addressed. So it is an event that happened.
What are your thoughts regarding what historically has been a big resource decision for the board? How much resources should be applied towards national teams, and how much resources should be applied towards development?
Is it a cop out answer to say that it's one and the same? Um,
Somewhat, yes. Historically,
y-
yes.
yes. So that, I know that's a cop out answer. The national team is a direct representation of what we've done with developing the sport. Now, my personal belief is that we should focus a lot more on assisting long-term or at least long-term vision grassroots projects, right? So in 2011, when JD Orr founds Ohio State, what does USATH do to support them? Well, from what I've heard, not too much. Now in 2024, we have an entire handball league that's sprouted with really the flagship program, aka the program that everyone can always play in that region, being Ohio State. We're trying to mimic something like that here in Colorado with CU and CSU, with Air Force being a constant anchor that's sitting there. So I think that USATH needs to support more of those efforts, and frankly, what needs to drive more of those efforts, focused on geographic growth. Because as I might go against the grain on this one, from a lot of the conversations I've heard, every single player on the national team right now is as American as I am. I was born in New Jersey. I've lived in the United States my entire life. I've lived in more states than most people have visited. They are as American as me, regardless of if they are American dash anything or dash American. That is completely irrelevant. However, while I can respect that, and while that should absolutely be something we utilize right now to ensure that our teams are competitive, the national team is a reflection of our league system, our lack of one. So those guys right now are holding up the fort of something that we have failed to develop on the local level. How much do you dedicate to each? I would argue that you don't need to put that many resources towards helping grassroots programs to grow here, and that you should focus a lot of effort on making sure that national team is as polished and pristine as it can look.
Now I'll kind of open the floor up to you as far as any other issues of concern that you want to address.
I think that most of what I've mentioned is kind of, my overarching vision for the sport already in the United States. I would like to see a lot of either community or entrepreneurial driven development at the at what we call the grassroots level, right? Um, Things like players just popping up with this new team or with new teams all over the country. That's cool, and we should be focusing on how to create an infrastructure, an adult league infrastructure, college league infrastructure, working with states to develop youth infrastructure in order to propel that. One of the biggest misses I think that we've really made over at least since I've been I'm sorry, since I've been involved in the sport, is there isn't really any work done by USATH to actually just develop colleges. And of course, everyone wants to go and say, well, we need to go to the Big Ten. We need to go to the SEC. We need to go right to the ACC. We need to get those big programs on board. That's not true. Um, I think that it is a lot of resources to do things like that. It's a lot of resources, right, to go to an actual top level conference commissioner and try to convince them to invest millions of dollars into a sport that doesn't exist. It's not a lot of resources to go to a cluster of schools, potentially around schools that already have programs, and say, hey, what do we need to do to put a guy in a stand with a USATH shirt on at your student involvement fair? You do that across the country in small little nodes, and suddenly you have the beginnings of more and more college teams. And the other thing is, one of the one of the reasons that I think people get mad when I say that, or when they balk at me when I say that, is they'll say, "Well, that's going to take forever. That's going to take years. That's going to we have no chance of developing the sport in my timeline that I have in my head." And the answer is, yeah, that's correct. Um, Baseball first played professionally in the 1890s, right? Coors Field was built in 2005. You don't build a national level sport. You don't build a national level sporting identity by snapping your fingers because you really, 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 really want to compete at the next Pan Am Games or the next Olympics. You don't. Athletes are a 35-year investment. From 5 to 40, you have to provide playing opportunities that are consistent and high level in order to create athletes. And right now, there's nowhere in the country where that happens. So we can either start and do the right thing to build the sport long term, and we can start that now, or we can continue to delude ourselves into thinking that there's some beautiful poison pill that we can take where suddenly next week the national team is going to be able to compete at the top level. It's not.
Right. Well, lots of good thoughts there. Appreciate you taking some time out of your day
Absolutely.
chatting. Even though I know you already, I feel like I know you and your handball dreams a little bit better now.
Yeah, I've definitely have rubbed some wrong shoulders with some of those things before, but I do think that the beauty of this sport is that we can do something special with it that no one else in America has done with any other sport yet.
All right, Kurt. Well, thanks again, and well, good luck with the election.
All right, thank you, sir, and you have a good one, John.